People always said I was strong. They said it like it was a compliment, like it was something I should be proud of. And I nodded, smiled, accepted the label, because correcting them would have taken more energy than I had. Strength, to them, meant I never complained. It meant I always showed up. It meant I carried my responsibilities like they were light, even when they were crushing me from the inside. So I smiled. I smiled when I walked into rooms where my heart was already tired. I smiled at co-workers who praised my work ethic but never noticed how quiet I'd become. I smiled at family gatherings, laughing at jokes while my thoughts drifted somewhere far away. The smile became automatic, like breathing. I didn't even have to think about it anymore. What no one saw was how heavy that smile was. Behind it lived a constant ache, a tightness in my chest that never fully went away. Some mornings I woke up already exhausted, as if I had been running all night in my dreams. I would sit on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands, wondering how something so small could feel so empty. Then I'd take a deep breath, put the smile back on, and step into the day. Because that's what strong people do. They keep going. I learned early that pain makes people uncomfortable. When you show too much of it, conversations end quickly. People change the subject. They tell you to be positive, to be grateful, to stop overthinking. So I stopped sharing. I started editing myself. I learned how to turn real answers into safe ones. How are you? I'm good. It became my most practiced lie. At work, I was reliable. The one who handled pressure well. The one who never said no. When deadlines piled up and stress filled the room, I stayed calm. Or at least, I looked calm. Inside, my thoughts raced like they were trapped in a burning building, looking for an exit that didn't exist. But no one saw that part. They only saw the finished tasks, the polite emails, the quiet nods. At home, it wasn't much different. I listened more than I spoke. I supported everyone else's struggles, offered advice, reassured them that things would be okay. I meant it when I said it to them. I just never believed it when I said it to myself. Sometimes, late at night, I would catch my reflection in the mirror. The smile was gone then. My face looked older, heavier, like it was holding secrets my mouth refused to speak. I'd study my eyes, searching for something familiar, something alive. Most nights, I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. Sleep didn't bring rest. It brought silence, and silence brought thoughts. Every mistake I'd ever made, every word I wished I'd said differently, every moment I felt like I wasn't enough, they all lined up in my head, waiting their turn. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, listening to my own breathing, wondering why staying alive felt so hard when nothing was technically wrong. That was the strangest part. From the outside, my life looked fine. No big tragedies. No obvious disasters. That made the pain feel illegitimate, like I didn't have the right to feel this way. So I pushed it down even harder. I told myself to stop being weak. I told myself to be grateful. And then, the next morning, I smiled again. People trusted my smile. They believed it without question. It was convincing, polished by years of practice. It told them I was okay, that I had everything under control, that I didn't need anything from anyone. In a way, I trained them to see me that way. The truth was, I was terrified of what would happen if I stopped smiling. What if they asked questions I couldn't answer? What if I disappointed them? What if I finally admitted how tired I was and realized I didn't know how to fix it? So I kept the mask on. I laughed at the right moments. I showed up when I was expected. I carried my pain quietly, neatly, so it wouldn't spill onto anyone else. I convinced myself that this was maturity, that this was strength, that everyone felt this way and just didn't talk about it. But late at night, When the world was asleep and the noise of the day faded, I felt it clearly. I wasn't okay. I wasn't fine. I was drowning slowly, silently behind the smile everyone believed. And the scariest part? No one noticed. Somewhere along the way, I became the person everyone leaned on. It didn't happen all at once. It was quiet, gradual, one small moment of reliability at a time. I listened when others needed to talk. I showed up when they called. I stayed calm when they panicked. Over time, people learned something about me: I could handle things. I always did. So they gave me more. More responsibility. More expectations. More emotional weight. And I took it, because saying no felt like failure. When someone needed advice, I was there. When someone felt lost, I helped them find direction. When someone was breaking, I held the pieces together with careful words and steady patience. I became the safe place, the one who didn't judge, didn't panic, didn't fall apart. What they didn't see was how every problem they handed me stayed with me long after the conversation ended. Their worries followed me home. Their fears sat beside me in the quiet. I replayed their stories in my head, wondering if I'd said the right thing, if I could have done more. I carried everyone else's pain like it was my responsibility to fix it. At work, it was the same pattern. If something was difficult or stressful, it landed on my desk. If someone else was overwhelmed, I stepped in. I told myself I was being helpful, dependable, strong. But deep down, I was afraid. Afraid that if I stopped being useful, I'd stop being valued. So I kept going. Days blurred together, each one filled with tasks and favors and unspoken expectations. I rarely paused long enough to ask myself how I felt. There wasn't time for that. Other people needed me. Other things mattered more. Whenever a crack formed inside me, I sealed it with logic. Others have it worse. This will pass. You're just tired. I said these things so often they began to sound like truth. But exhaustion has a way of creeping in quietly. It doesn't announce itself. It settles into your shoulders, your chest, your thoughts. It turns simple decisions into heavy ones. It makes even rest feel undeserved. Some nights, I lay in bed replaying the day, counting everything I'd done for everyone else. I tried to find proof that it was enough, that I was enough. But the list never brought peace. It only reminded me of how little space I'd left for myself. I noticed changes I didn't talk about. How my patience thinned. How my laughter came slower. How I felt irritated by things that never bothered me before. I started to feel like I was living on autopilot, moving, responding, functioning, but not really present. Life felt like a series of obligations rather than experiences. Even moments that were supposed to be happy felt distant, like I was watching them through glass. Still, I smiled. Because smiling kept the questions away. No one asked how I managed to handle so much. They just assumed I could. And I let them. I didn't correct them. I didn't tell them that every time I said I'm fine, it cost me something. The idea of opening up felt dangerous. What if I became a burden? What if people saw me differently? What if the image of strength I had built cracked, and I couldn't put it back together? So I stayed quiet. I became fluent in other people's emotions and completely illiterate in my own. I could read the smallest shifts in someone else's mood, anticipate their needs, soothe their fears. But when it came to myself, I felt numb. Disconnected. And yet, there was a strange comfort in being needed. As long as others depended on me, I didn't have to face the emptiness growing inside. As long as I was busy fixing, supporting, carrying, I didn't have to ask the questions I was afraid of. But the weight was getting heavier. Every responsibility I accepted added another layer to the pressure on my chest. Every unspoken feeling sank deeper, like a stone tied to my ribs. I told myself I could hold on a little longer. Just one more day. Just one more favor. Just one more person to help. I didn't realize it then, but I was slowly disappearing under the weight of everyone else's needs. And no one noticed. Because I never let them see how much it was costing me. The nights were the hardest. During the day, I could hide behind the routine, the smiles, the words of encouragement I gave to others. But night didn't allow distractions. Night stripped everything away. The noise of the world faded, leaving only me and my thoughts. And in that quiet, the truth became impossible to ignore. I felt like I was drowning. Not in water, but in silence. A silence so heavy it pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Thoughts I'd pushed aside during the day returned, multiplied, relentless. I replayed conversations I wished had gone differently, moments when I hadn't said enough, hadn't been enough. Regret and fear mingled, a storm that raged in the shadows of my room. Sometimes I wondered when it had started, the feeling that I wasn't really living, just existing. It wasn't a sudden thing. It was years of small compromises, of swallowing my own needs to meet everyone else's expectations. Years of saying I'm fine when I wasn't. Years of pretending, polishing the smile until it didn't feel like a lie anymore, even though it was. Sleep wasn't an escape. It was another battlefield. My mind refused to rest. I would stare at the ceiling for hours, heart racing, stomach tight, thoughts spinning like a carousel I couldn't get off. Questions haunted me: am I failing? Do I even matter? Will anyone notice if I disappear? And every time I tried to answer them, the words got stuck somewhere in my throat. I stopped enjoying the things I once loved. Music became background noise. Books felt heavy, impossible to focus on. Even food lost its taste. The small joys that had once given me life now felt distant, almost foreign. I wanted to feel alive, to feel connected, to feel something real, but the connection always slipped through my fingers. I wanted to scream sometimes, to let the tension out, but the walls of my room were too close, the quiet too intense, and my voice too fragile. I wanted to cry, but tears refused to come. It was like my body had forgotten how to release the pain. And all the while, I wore the mask during the day. I smiled at work, interacted with friends, nodded at acquaintances, laughed at jokes. I performed my life with precision, every gesture rehearsed, every expression calculated. People didn't suspect a thing. They trusted the smile. They believed it. And I kept believing it too, until the truth became impossible to deny. The truth was, I was drowning in silence. I carried so much inside me that I didn't even recognize the weight. It was heavy, pressing down, whispering constantly, "You can't handle this. You're not enough." And no matter how many tasks I completed, how many people I helped, how many smiles I offered, the emptiness persisted. Loneliness was the cruelest part. Surrounded by people who depended on me, I felt utterly alone. They didn't know what I was battling. They couldn't see the panic that rose when I was left with my thoughts, the despair that crept in when I realized no one had ever asked how I was doing. I wasn't invisible to them, they needed me, but I was invisible to myself. I became a master of pretending. I fooled the world, and over time, I even fooled myself. I told myself I was fine. I convinced myself the exhaustion, the emptiness, the relentless ache, was normal. I told myself I could survive it all, because that's what strong people do. They survive. They don't break. But surviving felt more like existing. And the nights made it undeniable. In the stillness, the weight I carried pressed down harder. My chest felt tight. My thoughts screamed. My body ached. I realized I hadn't truly felt free in years. Every day was another layer of expectation, another performance, another act of pretending. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't even confess it. So I drowned quietly, behind my smile. The scariest part wasn't that no one knew. The scariest part was that I almost forgot the truth myself. Almost believed the lie that I was okay, that I could manage, that the weight would never crush me. But deep down, something was changing. The silence of the night was no longer empty. It was asking me to listen. To face what I had been avoiding for so long. And the truth, no matter how painful, had to be acknowledged. I was drowning. And I couldn't keep pretending forever. It wasn't dramatic. No sirens. No one rushing to the door. No sudden disaster. Just me, alone in the darkness, finally meeting the truth I had been running from. I had spent years perfecting the mask, the smile, the calm voice, the unwavering support for everyone else. People trusted it, leaned on it, even admired it. And I had let them. I let myself believe that being strong meant never showing the cracks, never admitting weakness, never asking for help. But that night, the cracks became impossible to hide. I was sitting on the floor of my bedroom, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the faint pattern of the carpet. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your own thoughts echo like thunder. I felt the weight of all the days, all the smiles, all the pretending, pressing down on me. My chest ached, my limbs trembled, my mind raced, and I realized I could not keep doing this. The first words escaped in a whisper, almost foreign to my own ears. "I'm not okay." The sound startled me. I had said it out loud, finally acknowledging the truth I had buried for so long. Saying it didn't make me weaker, it made the years of silence feel heavier. And yet, it was a release, even if just a tiny one. Tears came slowly at first, hesitant, as if testing the waters. Then they poured. Not just the small, polite tears that people cry for a few minutes before stopping, but the deep, raw ones that come from years of silence and hiding. I cried for the exhaustion I had swallowed, for the weight I had carried alone, for the fear that I had buried myself so deeply that no one would ever see me. For the first time in a long time, I felt the truth. Not the polished, rehearsed version I showed the world, but the real version, the raw, fragile, scared me. The one I had hidden behind 1,000 smiles. And I realized something important. Strength wasn't the mask. Strength wasn't the ability to endure everything silently. Strength was surviving long enough to finally admit the truth, to finally let myself feel what I had been avoiding. I stayed there for hours, letting the tears flow, letting the sobs shake me, letting the silence speak. The room didn't judge me. The shadows didn't mock me. And for the first time in years, I didn't have to pretend. I thought about all the people I had carried, all the weight I had taken on for others, and I realized it had been noble, but it had been lonely. I had convinced myself that being needed by others was enough to make me whole. But it wasn't. I needed myself. I needed to acknowledge my pain, my fears, my exhaustion. And in that acknowledgement, there was something new, a small, fragile spark of hope. It whispered that maybe I didn't have to keep drowning quietly. Maybe admitting my struggle wasn't weakness, it was the first step toward finding relief. Maybe I didn't have to carry everything alone. Maybe I could let someone in, even just one person, and let them see the cracks I had hidden for so long. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would no longer ignore the weight I carried. I would no longer pretend that the smile was enough. I would begin, slowly, to let the truth live alongside me. It didn't happen instantly. The pain didn't disappear, the fears didn't vanish, and the weight didn't lift immediately. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. I realized I had been living behind a mask for so long that I had almost forgotten who I was beneath it. That night, I started the process of remembering. And it was terrifying. Because letting the mask slip, even a little, meant showing the world a side of me I had always protected, the fragile, vulnerable, imperfect side. But it also meant finally being honest with myself. And for the first time, the honesty didn't feel like the end of me. It felt like the beginning of something real. I sat on that floor, tears streaming, heart pounding, and whispered again, "I'm not okay. And that's okay." It was the first time in years I had said it without shame. And in that small, powerful admission, the smile I had worn so faithfully started to crack, not to hide, but to heal. Healing didn't happen overnight. There was no magical moment when all the pain disappeared, no instant switch from broken to whole. The mask I had worn for years didn't vanish immediately. Sometimes, I still caught myself forcing a smile, pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. But now, there was a difference. The mask was no longer a prison. It was a choice, not a necessity. The first change came slowly, almost imperceptibly. I started noticing my own needs again. I let myself rest when I was tired, instead of pushing through for everyone else. I acknowledged the exhaustion, the anxiety, the loneliness I had buried for so long. I began to speak about it, not to everyone, not yet, but to one or two people I trusted. And in doing so, I discovered something unexpected. People didn't pull away. Some didn't understand, yes. But some stepped closer. They listened. They held space for me. And that made all the difference. I learned that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was courage. It was proof that I valued myself enough to be honest about my struggles. The strength I had thought came from smiling through pain was real, but it was incomplete. True strength, I realized, came from surviving long enough to face the truth, to embrace vulnerability, and to allow myself to be supported. There were days when the weight returned, heavier than ever. Nights when the silence pressed in, threatening to pull me under again. But now I had tools, coping mechanisms, and most importantly, a willingness to feel. I didn't run from the pain anymore. I didn't pretend it didn't exist. I met it, acknowledged it, and let it pass through me rather than burying it deep where it festered. I began small. I allowed myself to cry when I needed to. I spoke honestly with friends about how I felt. I took moments for myself, moments where I didn't have to perform or pretend or carry anyone else's burdens. Slowly, I reconnected with parts of life I had forgotten, music that moved me, books that inspired me, laughter that felt genuine. The smiles returned, but they were different now. They weren't a mask. They weren't a performance. They were real. And that made them stronger, more powerful, more enduring. People could sense it. They could feel the authenticity behind my eyes, the relief that comes when someone finally stops pretending. I realized that surviving pain wasn't the same as living. For years, I had existed, performing strength for the world while my soul quietly cried out for release. But living meant more. Living meant feeling. Living meant accepting imperfection, embracing vulnerability, and learning to love myself even in moments of weakness. I also learned the most difficult lesson: it's okay if not everyone understands. Some people will never see the struggles you've carried silently. Some will dismiss your pain. Some will expect the old version of you, the strong, unbreakable one forever. And that's okay. Their understanding is not necessary for your healing. What matters is that you see yourself clearly, honor your truth, and give yourself permission to breathe. And breathe I did. Step by step, I rebuilt a connection with myself that had been lost. I learned to recognize my limits and respect them. I learned to speak up when I was overwhelmed. I learned to embrace help without shame, to accept kindness without hesitation, and to let the people I trusted in without fear of losing my strength. Some days, the pain still lingers. Some nights, the silence returns. But now, I meet it with awareness, not fear. I no longer need to hide behind a smile to survive. I smile because I want to, because it reflects who I truly am, not who I think I should be. If you are reading this and you feel like you are drowning quietly too, know this: you are not alone. You don't have to smile through your pain for the world's comfort. You don't have to carry every burden yourself. You don't have to wait until you break to seek help. Strength isn't hiding your pain. Strength is facing it. Strength is surviving long enough to see that vulnerability is not weakness, it is life. And life, in all its raw, messy beauty, is worth living fully, openly, honestly. So I breathe again. I breathe because I finally let myself. And that, I realize, is enough.